Okay, we are on Judges, starting chapter 4. And it goes all the way through. So we'll just do like we did yesterday, I guess. Chapter 4, verse 1. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Ehud died. And the Lord sold them, there's that word sold again, into the land of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. Now Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under the palm of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the people of Israel came up to her for judgment. She sent and summoned Barak, the son of Abinoam, from Kadesh Naphtali, and said to him, "Has not the Lord, the God of Israel, commanded you, go gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun. And I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give him into your hand." That's a question. I'm sorry. "Go gather your men at Mount Tabor, taking 10,000 from the people of Naphtali and the people of Zebulun. And I will draw out Sisera, the general of Jabin's army, to meet you by the river Kishon with his chariots and his troops, and I will give you into his hand." Barak said to her, "If you go with me," listen, you know how I am about these men. "If you go with me, woman," no, that's my okay. "If you go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." And she said, "I will surely go with you. Nevertheless, the road on which you are going will not lead to your glory, for the Lord will sell Sisera into the hand of a woman." And then Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. And Barak called out Zebulun and Naphtali to Kadesh, and 10,000 men went up to his hills, and Deborah went up with him. Now Heber the Kenite, there's the Kenites. Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law of Moses, and had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zonannim, which is near Kadesh.
I just want to say one thing. My Bible said it's Moses' brother-in-law, and you said it was his father-in-law.
Father-in-law, yeah.
Mine says brother-in-law.
Mine says brother-in-law.
Okay, now Heber the Kenite had separated from the Kenites, the descendants of Hobab, the father-in-law, and you're saying it's saying brother-in-law.
A descendant of Moses' brother-in-law, Hobab. A descendant of Moses' brother-in-law. A descendant of
Hobab.
Mine says father-in-law.
Is it
Mine says brother-in-law in the text, but then there's a reference.
Yes.
It says or father-in-law.
Okay. And it's a mute. Never mind.
And had pitched his tent as far away as the oak in Zonannim, which is near Kadesh. When Sisera was told that Barak, the son of Abinoam, had gone up to Mount Tabor, Sisera called out all his chariots, 900 chariots of iron, and all the men who were with him, from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. And Deborah said to Barak, "Up, for this is the day in which the Lord has given Sisera into your hand. Does not the Lord go out before you?" So Barak went down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him, and the Lord routed Sisera and all his chariots and all his army before Barak by the edge of the sword. And Sisera got down from his chariot and fled away on foot. Chicken. Barak pursued the chariots and the army to Harosheth Hagoyim, and all the army of Sisera fell by the edge of the sword. Not a man was left. But Sisera fled away on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. For there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber and the Kenite, Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera and said to him, "Turn aside, my lord, turn aside to me, and do not be afraid." So he turned aside to her into the tent, and she covered him with a rug. And he said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." So she opened a skin of milk and gave him a drink and covered him. And he said to her, "Stand at the opening of the tent, and if any man comes and asks you, 'Is there anyone here?' say no." But Jael, the wife of Heber, took a tent peg and took a hammer in her hand. And then she went softly to him and drove the peg into his temple until it went down into the ground while he was lying fast asleep from weariness. So he died. And behold, as Barak was pursuing Sisera, Jael went out to meet him and said, "Come, and I will show you the man whom you are seeking." So he went into her tent, and there lay Sisera, dead, with a tent peg in his temple. So on that day, God subdued Jabin, the king of Canaan, before the people of Israel. And the hand of the people of Israel pressed harder and harder against Jabin, the king of Canaan, until they destroyed Jabin, king of Canaan. Good story.
They could make a movie out of that.
Yeah, right? I was trying, so was he saying that that JL's people and the people that Sisera was against were friends? Is that what he was saying? But I mean, honestly, he was supposed to be leading the people and he left them to die and he ran off. Am I interpreting this correctly?
Heber's family was on friendly terms with Jabin. And Jael is Heber's wife. So yes, they were on friendly terms.
Now there's a teaching on the Kenites and from Crazy Man. And his teaching basically is that the Kenites are not saved, but they can become saved. But I would have to go listen to it again. But this Kenite genealogy is important. I just don't remember what it is. All right, Cindy, whenever you're ready.
Okay, John only addresses 3 verses in that chapter.
He must not have been feeling well for a while.
I don't think he's into it at all.
Okay.
4:4, Deborah, a prophetess. She was an unusual woman of wisdom and influence who did the tasks of a judge except for military leadership. God can use women mightily for civil, religious, or other tasks. That is, Huldah, the prophetess, Philip's daughter, in prophesying, and Phoebe, a deaconess. Deborah's rise to such a role is the exception in the book because of Barak's failure to show the courage to lead courageously. God rebuked his cowardice by the pledge that a woman would kill Sisera. 4:19-20. She gave him a drink and covered him. Usually, this was the strongest pledge of protection possible. 4:21, a tent peg and a hammer. Jael's bold stroke in a tent rather than on a battlefield draws Deborah's and Barak's praise. Her strength and skill had no doubt been toughened by a common Bedouin duty of hammering down pegs to secure tents or striking them loose to take down tents. That's it.
Okay, I'm thinking about one time, like these women must have been tough. Because I'm thinking about this one time I caught a mouse and I tried to stomp on him because I wanted to kill him because I didn't want him in the house, but at the same time, I like in my heart didn't want to take his life. And so I was like kind of like, and then I made my stepson actually killed the mouse. And I'm thinking this woman is like going in with a tent peg and having to take it through this man's head. I can't imagine like the mentality and the strength that it took to do that. They must have already known. But then why wouldn't she call her husband and be like, hey, he's in the tent? That's what I would have done.
Yeah, I know what you mean, because I even have trouble running over a groundhog on the road anymore.
If I hit a squirrel, I'm like, I'm sorry, Lord. I hit the squirrel. I took the life. I like that. But he said Deborah had led because Barak was a coward. That was very nicely said. All right, Kathy, whenever you're ready.
Okay. I kind of looked over this a little bit. I found it kind of interesting. They have Judges 4 and 5, and they have it out in 5 different acts. It starts out, the cast of characters in this drama is as follows: Jabin, king of Hazor in Canaan, a tyrant; Deborah, a Jewish judge, a woman of faith and courage; Barak, a reluctant Jewish general; Sisera, captain of Jabin's army; Heber, a Canaanite neighbor at peace with Jabin; Jael, wife of Heber, handy with a hammer; Jehovah, God, in charge of wars and weather.
So this
Now
is
let
4 and 5. They're covering chapters 4 and 5.
Well, yeah, it's kind of an overview of the 4 and 5, and then it says, now let the drama unfold.
I want to write those
I
down.
do too. So
Start
these
at
are like
1.
acts
I'm
in
sorry.
a play. Like these are like acts in a play.
The
Yeah, like
actors,
it
the
has-
cast of characters.
Yeah, this is the cast of characters.
Okay, hang on. Cast of characters. Okay.
Jabin,
Jabin.
yes.
And who was he?
King of Hazor, Hazor,
King of Hazor
in Canaan.
in Canaan. Canaan.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it has a semicolon and it says a tyrant.
A tyrant. Okay.
Deborah, a Jewish judge.
Wait, Deborah, am I spelling her right? Yeah, I do. Okay. A Jewish judge.
Semicolon, a woman of faith and courage.
Okay.
Then we got Barak.
Barak.
Yes. A reluctant Jewish general. Doesn't call him a coward here, but
Jewish general. I'm going to put coward in brackets. Is there any more?
and then that Sisera, Sisera,
Okay.
captain of Jabin's army.
Oh, okay. Jabin, isn't that her people? Wasn't that JL's people? No.
I had to reread that because it was we never really found out what happened to the king Jabin. It just said after Deborah killed Sisera, who was the captain, and from that time on, Israel became stronger and stronger against King Jabin until he and all his people were destroyed. But we don't really know what happened to King Jabin.
Well,
'cause I
Heber was
looking-
a Kenite, okay, and then there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazar, and Heber, the Kenite. So she was ticked because he was supposed to be leading the people and he didn't. He cowarded into her tent to take a nap. So her people and Jabin were friends, and Sisera was supposed to be leading this military of Jabin.
he jumped off the chariot and ran on foot to
He-
their,
He ran like a baby. Him and Barak were probably best friends. Okay. So, okay, captain of Jabin's army.
And then we got Heber, Heber, a Kenite neighbor, at peace with Jabin.
And peace with Jabin. And then that his wife was Jael.
Jael is next.
Okay. Jael.
Yes. Wife of Heber, semicolon, handy with the hammer.
Okay.
The last one
Oh,
is Jehovah God,
JehO.
Ovah. In charge of wars and weather.
Oh, love it. And weather. Except for when man tries to screw with it, or they think they do.
On number 5, Heber, who was he friends with?
Jabin.
Jabin.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. That really helped me put it together in my head.
Now we're going to go into Act 1. This is verses 1 to 3, a tragic situation.
In 4.
Yeah, chapter 4, verses 1 to 3. Jabin is the key person in Act 1, for God raised him up to discipline the people of Israel. For 80 years, the Jews had enjoyed rest because of the leadership of Ehud, the longest period of peace recorded in the book of Judges.
Okay, I think that's why I was confused, because it was Israel that was coming against Jabin. But Jael was the wife of the
Heber.
Kenite who was at peace with Jabin.
And then there, right there, there's a footnote here that says, you would expect Judges 4:1 to read, when Shamgar was dead, since Shamgar is the judge's last name. But Shamgar's ministry was local and contemporary with that of Deborah in chapter 5, verses 6 to 7. Meanwhile, Ehud exercised authority over all the land and was architect of the 80 years of rest. That was a side note.
What was the short version of what he said for 1 through 3?
Which said he was the key person in Act 1. God raised him up to discipline the people of Israel. For 80 years, the Jews. Oh, you mean like the title of it?
Well, yeah, like the Act 1. What did he use for kind of like?
A tragic situation.
Okay.
But no sooner was this godly judge removed than the people lapsed back into idolatry, and God had to punish them. Israel, as portrayed in the book of Judges, illustrates the difference between religious reformation and spiritual revival. Reformation temporarily changes outward conduct, while revival permanently alters the inward character. When Ehud removed the idols and commanded the people to worship only Jehovah, They obeyed him. But when the constraint was removed, the people obeyed their own desires. The nation of Israel was like the man in Jesus' parable who got rid of one demon, cleaned house, and then ended up with the 7 worst demons. Matthew 12. The empty heart is prey to every form of evil. Canaan was made up of a number of city-states, each of which was ruled by a king. Jabin was the official title or name of the king of Hazor. He was also called King of Canaan. This title probably means that he was the head of the confederacy of kings. Joshua had burned Hazor, but the Canaanites had rebuilt it and occupied it. With his large army and his 900 chariots of iron, Jabin was securely in control of the land. As you read the narrative, however, you get the impression that Sisera, captain of Jabin's army, was the real power in the land. Jabin isn't even mentioned in Deborah's song in Judges 5. Once again, the people of Israel cried out to God not to forgive their sins, but to relieve their suffering. Had they truly repented, God would have done much more than deliver them from physical slavery. He would have liberated them from their spiritual bondage as well. To ask God for comfort and not cleansing is only to sow seeds of selfishness that will eventually produce another bitter harvest. David's prayer is what Israel needed to pray. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Psalm 51:10. Now we go to Act 2. This is verses 4 to 7. A divine revelation.
4 to 7.
Yes.
Okay.
God had raised up a courageous woman named Deborah. It has in parentheses B-E-E. I'm not sure what that means. If that was like supposed to be a nickname or what, but
B-E-E.
yeah. To be the judge in the land. This was an act of grace, but it was also an act of humiliation for the Jews, for they lived in a male-dominated society that wanted only mature male leadership. As for my people,
How about that bright idea? Anyway.
as for my people, children are their oppressors and women rule over them. Isaiah 3:12.
Wait a minute. Is that again? Isaiah
3:12. As for my people, children are their oppressors and women rule over them.
As for my people, children are their oppressors.
Yes.
And
women rule over them.
Their oppressors. And women rule over them. Interesting.
For God to give his people a woman judge was to treat them like little children, which is exactly what they were when it came to spiritual things. There is another note here. Let me see. The selection of Deborah may also indicate that at that time, there were no men willing and able to do the job. Even Barak was afraid to confront the enemy without Deborah's help, and he was a man of faith. Hebrews 11:32.
Oh, is he mentioned there?
I don't know. Has that there?
Wow, let me go look. Hebrews 11:32.
32, yeah. Is that where they do the by faith so and so and so and so?
Oh, good heavens. 32. And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Japheth, of David and Samuel and the prophets. He's mentioned there. Interesting. And so he's mentioned in the chapter of faith.
Yeah,
I'm going to make a note up here where I wrote coward. Mentioned. In Hebrews 11. Little plot in the story. Little twist.
I liked what he said about the Israelites acted like children. So that's why a woman had to lead them.
That's what's happening now. We have men that are acting like women, and their wives have to run everything because they're not responsible enough to be spiritually mature, take care of the finances, work a job, whatever. Like, not all of them, but like to be the men and defend their families and their country. Like, we're doing the same thing today. Hence podcast coming.
Deborah was both a judge and a prophetess. Moses' sister Miriam was a prophetess, in reference to Exodus. And later, biblical history introduces us to Huldah and Nadiah, Anna, and 4 daughters of Philip.
Mm-hmm.
God called Deborah a prophetess and a judge, but she saw herself as a mother to her people. I, Deborah, arose a mother in Israel. Judges 5:7. The wayward Jews were her children, and she welcomed them and counseled them. God revealed to Deborah that Barak, and in parentheses, it has the word lightning. Now, I'm not sure what that means because behind Deborah, it had the word be. Now, behind Barak, it has the word lightning.
There's no little asterisks or anything?
No.
Hmm.
Anyway, God revealed to Deborah that Barak was to assemble and lead the Israelite army and draw Sisera's troops into a trap near Mount Tabor, and there the Lord would defeat them. Mount Tabor lies at the junction of Zebulun, Naphtali, and Issachar, not far from the Kishon River. If Barak would lead the Israelite army toward Mount Tabor, God would draw Sisera and his troops toward the Kishon River, where God would give Barak the victory. When God wants to glorify himself through his people, he always has a perfect plan for us to follow. God chose the leader of his army, the place for the battle, and the plan for his army to follow. God also guaranteed the victory. It was like good old days of Joshua again. Now we go into Act 3, verses 8 to 10. What time is it?
You got 7 minutes.
Oh, okay. Verses 8 to 10, Act 3 is a reluctant participant.
A reluctant
Participant. We aren't told that Barak was a judge, which explains why he got his orders from Deborah, God's appointed leader in the land. Barak was from Naphtali, one of the tribes that would send volunteers to the battlefield. Verse 6. Like Moses before him in Exodus, and Gideon in Judges, and Jeremiah after him, Barak hesitated when told what God wanted him to do. We know that God's commandments are God's enablements, and that we should obey his will in spite of circumstances, feelings, or consequences. But we don't always do it.
God's commandments are God's enablements.
Yes.
Thank you.
Was Barak's response an evidence of unbelief or a military? Let me start that over. Was Barak's response an evidence of unbelief or a mark of humility? He didn't accuse God of making a mistake. All he did was ask Deborah to go with him to the battle. Was that because she was a prophetess and he might need a word from the Lord? Or was it to help him enlist more volunteers for the army? The fact that Deborah agreed to accompany Barak suggests that his request wasn't out of God's will, although in granting it, God took the honor from the men and gave it to the women. Barak enlisted 10,000 men from his own tribe of Naphtali and the neighboring tribe of Zebulun. Later, volunteers from the tribes of Benjamin, Ephraim, and Manasseh West, and Issachar joined these men, and the army grew to 40,000 men. It's possible that the original 10,000 soldiers initiated the campaign that lured Sisera into the trap, and then the other 30,000 joined them for the actual battle and mopping up operation. The tribes that were summoned but refused to come were Reuben, Dan, Asher, and Manasseh East. When you consider that weapons were scarce in Israel and that there was no effective standing army, what Deborah and Barak did was indeed an act of faith. But God had promised to give them victory, and they were depending on his promise. That has a reference to Romans 10:17. There is where it says, when you consider the weapons were scarce, there is a note, and it says, it's possible that this verse is speaking of deception rather than disarmament. Israel might have possessed weapons, but kept them hidden from the enemy. When the war was declared, the men brought them out. Okay, then we go to Act 4. It's pretty long. It covers 11 to 23. Well, it does have it broke down here.
What is the title?
It's titled, Act 4 is titled A Victorious Confrontation. And it's got verses 11 and 12 broke out, so I'll do them.
Okay.
The Lord is the leading actor in this scene. He not only controlled the enemy army and brought it into the trap, but he also controlled the weather and used a storm to defeat Sisera's troops. In 11 and 12, Sisera is warned. Verse 12 suggests that it was Heber and his family who first warned Sisera that the Jews were about to revolt and where the Israelite army was mustering. We met the Kenites in 1:16, chapter 1, verse 16, and discovered they were the distant relatives of the Jews through Moses. It seems strange that Heber, the Kenite, would separate himself from his people who worship Jehovah and be friendly with idolatrous tyrants like Jabin and Sisera. Perhaps he needed protection and business of the Canaanites as he carried on his trade as an itinerant metalworker. The Kenites seemed to be attached to the tribe of Judah, but the men of Judah weren't among the volunteers in Barak's army. It's possible, however, to view Heber from another perspective and see him as part of God's plan to lure Sisera into the trap. Heber wasn't an ally of Jabin's. He was simply trying to maintain a neutral position in a divided society. But once the Jewish army was in place of Mount Tabor, Heber ran and gave the news to Sisera, and Sisera had no reason to question the report. Sisera began to move his army and fell right into the trap.
Wait, Heber went to him first? What did I just say? Did it say Heber went to Sisera and told him it was a trap?
Heber wasn't an ally of Jabin's. He was simply trying to maintain a neutral position in society. Yes, Heber ran and gave the news to Sisera.
Do they give a reference for that?
No, it's just in verses 11 and 12, this section. But
Yeah, so 12 says when Sisera was told.
Yeah, that's what mine says. It doesn't mention that.
My footnote just says,
Might be somewhere else.
oh,
No, go ahead. No, I was just saying
Oh,
that maybe
okay.
there's more information somewhere else.
Heber was Jael's husband. He was from the Kenite tribe who had long been Israel's ally, mind you. But for some reason, Heber decided to side with Jabin, maybe because Jabin's army appeared to have the military advantage. It was probably Heber who told General Sisera that the Israelites were camped near Mount Tabor. Although Heber put in his lot with Jabin and his forces, his wife Jael did not. probably
Oh, the plot
says,
thickens.
Sisera couldn't have been more pleased when Jael offered him her tent as a hiding place.
That's why she didn't get her husband to do it. Because he was trying
They
to
had
fit
been, yeah, even though they were allies with Israel for a long time, they, for some reason, he decided to put his lot in with Jabin.
So we're saying Heber probably warned Sisera.
Yeah, he set up the
Okay.
trap unknowingly. God's in control here.
It
Yeah.
says,
And
even
God
though,
sent Heber to tell Sisera or whatever about these troops. So I think just God used him in this battle.
Well, I was wondering why JL put the tent peg through his head, but it's because her husband wasn't going to do it.
Right.
well, and it also says, even though Heber was loyal to Sisera's forces, Jael certainly was not. Since women of that day were in charge of pitching the tents, Jael had no problem driving the tent peg into Sisera's head while he slept.
So
Deborah-
women were in charge of pitching the tents.
Yeah, so she had full access to, the
Seems to
tent
me though,
peg.
there's a difference between putting a tent peg in the ground and in somebody's head.
Yeah. Oh,
Mm.
it goes on to say that Deborah's prediction was thus fulfilled. She had said that the honor of conquering Sisera would go to a woman in 4:9.
In both cases with Deborah and JL,
Yeah.
they both were active participants in this.
Mm-hmm.
So what did it say, Kim? It said Heber told Sisera about the trap that JL didn't buy in.
Correct.
Yeah.
Are you at a good stopping place, Kathy?
Yeah, next it's going to go to verses 13 to 16.
Oh, can I just interrupt for a minute?
Yeah.
When it talks about Heber being faithful to
Jabin.
Sisera's troops, now about Heber being loyal to Sisera's troops, it references 4:11, and that's why it mentioned that Heber was a descendant of Moses's father-in-law Hobab, who had moved away from the rest of his clan and had been living in various places near Kadesh. So that might be the connection between Heber and Sisera.
Well, that's an
Because
odd behavior too for the patriarchy, like in such a patriarchal society that the head of the family would move away from the tribe. That's
Mhm.
odd. Hmm.
Moses'
The plot
father-in-law.
thickens. Any last minute thoughts? If not, this concludes the study of God's word for today. We'll pick back up tomorrow for the rest of Act 4. Have a nice day, ladies.